What's up, guys? Colin Gay here with the Scarlet and Gray Report podcast. Just got back from the Schottenstein Center from talking with Malaki Branham, Chris Holtmann. Today was going to come, you guys. You know this. We all know this. It seemed like based on the press conference and everything that was happening, could Malaki Branham come back for another year? No. He's a lottery pick. He's going to be a lottery pick. He knew that. So today wasn't a shock when he said that he was going to stay in the NBA draft and test things out. But it's what I kind of wanted to do here, not only give my reactions to what was said at this press conference, and there's already stories up on charlotteandgrayreport.com kind of along with the video of what was said by both Malaki and Chris Holtmann. But I kind of wanted to get into here, just get my thoughts out there about kind of the development, what I saw from Malaki early, what he kind of turned into, and why he's in the spot that he's in now. And I think a lot of it has to do could give you guys a preview about what Ohio State wants to see out of its freshmen next year. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I kind of wanted to start back to where Malaki was during the Akron game or early on Niagara, like these games that nobody knew who the hell Malaki Branham was. And he's a Columbus kid, Mr. Ohio basketball, very, very just highly, he's one of those guys, it seems like, where it's a guy that Ohio State has to get. It's almost a given, especially in football, when you have a Mr. Ohio, it's kind of one of those guys you're like, yep, he's a Buckeye. He's going to be in Columbus. He's going to start very, very quickly. That's football. For basketball, it's not always the case, but it's a thing that where, Chris Holtmann and his staff are kind of trying to develop this pipeline where if you're the top Ohio kid, Ohio State is the place for you. And I think it started with Malaki Branham, or it started well before that, but I think Malaki Branham is kind of this latest example of, okay, what can an Ohio guy turn into? So first perspective or first just idea of who Malaki Branham was. And it's kind of hard, easy to forget now because we kind of know the finished product and know where he's at, especially now that he's heading to the NBA. But you see a guy who, 6'6", lanky guy, not really filled out, playing the wing because he had to. Justice Sueing, Seth Towns, both gone. If you remember, guys, Justice Sueing played 32 minutes in the first two games of the regular season and then did not see the field again because of injury. Seth Towns was gone the whole year, recovering from back injury. Both of those guys will be back, as you know. But you see a freshman kind of forced into this position, being like, okay, Ohio State's like, yeah, we need a scorer. We need somebody. Could it be this kid? Maybe. Through the first 10 games, it didn't look like that. And one of the games that Chris Holtmann mentioned when I asked him about it was the Wisconsin game and how it was the last game before that extended break, heading during that time where COVID struck the program. They were trying to play games and other teams had COVID. So extended break for Ohio State. But that Wisconsin game was a rough one for Malaki Branham. It was one of those games where he looked like a freshman, couldn't contend with that Wisconsin defense. They were giving him a lot of things. If I don't have the stats in front of me, I'm pretty sure he only played 17 minutes in that game, missed both of his field goal attempts. He was just he was overpowered over the Wisconsin defense was just way too much for this kid. And one of the interesting thing is I actually used this as my lead for my feature coming out of the Schottenstein Center today, but Chris Holtmann remembers, he didn't say it was the Wisconsin game, but it was a game earlier in the year, which, it could have been many of these performances where in the first 10 games, Malaki Branham only averaged 6 points a game, shooting 38% from the field. So he remembers, Chris Holtmann remembered waking up to a text from Malaki, or he's probably been up for a while. Anyway, it was like 7 a.m. and he had a text from Malaki that was basically going through saying, thank you so much for taking this chance on me. Thank you for doing what you told me you would do when you recruited me, is letting me play through mistakes, which is huge because it's a thing where if you're developing a kid, which Ohio State has been able to do over the past few years, you've seen it at the NBA level, whether it's Jayshawn Tate, Keita Bates-Diop, Dwayne Washington Jr., EJ Liddell, who's going to be a first-round pick next year. It's a process, guys. It's a process. Ohio State's not going to get those day one guys like Kentucky or Duke or North Carolina. These guys, even though a lot of college basketball these days is about development. So, I mean, Malaki had those growing pains. It wasn't that freshman wall because it was way too early at that point. And then Nebraska happened. And you see this guy who kind of he looked completely different. And I remember watching that game on TV coming out of the Rose Bowl and being like, who the hell is this kid? He looked bigger than his 6'5" frame looked like as in that 2021 stretch of 10 games, in his first 10 games of his career. He looked much bigger. He looked much faster. He looked like a guy who was so much more comfortable on the court. He was getting by people. He was taking initiative when EJ Liddell couldn't do it. He was the offense. It was almost a preview of what Ohio State was expecting to see out of Malaki in 2022, 2023 at the time. You saw this guy who's like, oh, EJ Liddell's gone, but we can build this team around this kid with this freshman class of Bruce Thornton, Bryce Sensabaugh, Roddy Gale Jr., Felix Akbara, Bowen Hardman. These guys, they can create. They would be young, sure, but Malaki Branham would be the centerpiece. And then he just continued to do it. He just continued to go out there and be consistent. And he had that game against Indiana where that overtime win, huge win for Ohio State, especially after getting blown out by the Hoosiers at Assembly Hall. You saw this kid who was not rattled. You saw a kid who was playing consistently and confidently. And he just kept doing that. And that's what got the NBA's attention for a kid who wasn't on any draft boards, nobody's draft radar at the beginning of the season when he first came into Ohio State. He had become a draft pick, which is crazy to say, especially having watched him from day one to now. It was crazy to think. And then not only a draft pick, but a first round draft pick, and not only a first round draft pick, but a potential lottery pick. Because, and Chris Holtmann made this perfectly clear today, it's not all about what Malaki Branham did at Ohio State. It's the combination of age. He's 18. He'll be 19 by the time that he gets to the NBA. He's young. He's confident. He's consistent. And he has the intangibles of being whatever an NBA team wants him to be, whether it's the scorer. He needs to develop defensively a little bit, but he can be a guy that can kind of just grow into this player where they're getting basically a high school kid that shined against Big Ten defenses for 4 months. I'm not even going back to those non-conference games early in the year, but from January to April, he was one of the best players in the Big Ten, averaging 17 points a game and shooting over 50%. That's unheard of as a freshman. And that's a guy that they're like, oh, you did this? The NBA teams are like, oh, you did this? Then, yeah, you can do this at the NBA level. Maybe it'll take a little bit of grooming. Maybe it'll take a little bit of work, but it's something to build around. And that causes, Ohio State from that point, whether it's getting into, from that point of late in the year where he's averaging like 20 points a game and just consistently, Ohio State's like, oh no, we need something to build around. And they got that reality check heading out of like late in the year. So they had time to plan, but that wasn't the plan. And Chris Holtmann made that perfectly clear today. And I think that's an important thing to say, where it was almost like the Jamari Wheeler plan, in a sense, where the plan with Jamari Wheeler was to pair him with Dwayne Washington Jr. in the backcourt, give Jamari Wheeler kind of that defensive and playmaking kind of responsibility, with Dwayne Washington Jr. as the mainstay of the offense of the backcourt, shooting threes, being that consistent guy. That's not how it worked. And that's not how, and that was where Malaki Branham, along with the Justice Suing injury, kind of emerged. So what will Branham bring? And I think we kind of already touched on this, but it's kind of just this potential based on size and smoothness and speed and scoring ability. I mean, the man looks like a gazelle gliding down the court. And I remember talking to a bunch of colleagues, and I mean, some of his 31-point performance against Indiana was one of the quietest 30-point performances I've ever seen. Like, he's just smooth as all get out and can run a team if he wants to. I think one of the most impressive parts of his game is his passing ability, his ability to create shots for others. That's actually what I took most out of that Indiana game, was his passing ability, his ability to create offense instead of those quiet 31 points, which actually ended up being so important for a team that was kind of peaking at that point. So what's next for Ohio State? Because, and I think that's the main question, and the question at the back of everybody's mind watching, Malaki do what we all thought Malaki Branham was going to do is, okay, what's next? Because there's a lot of talent coming back for Ohio State. Let me backtrack on that. There is talent coming back for Ohio State, whether it's Justice Sweet and Seth Towns are both back. Zed Key's back, who, sidebar, if you guys follow us on the board, you got this info early. But before the press conference started, I got there early, was watching Zed Key do some kind of court work, dribbling, shooting. The man looked slimmed down, and he was shooting threes like all get out. So take that with what you will. But man, if he can be he's going to be important, because he's one of the only returners. So Justice Suing, as I said, Seth Towns, Zed Key, Eugene Brown, the third, who I'm very, very high on. I think a little bit higher on than a lot of people in that look at this team or watch this team every day. I'm very, very high on Eugene Brown. And then Kalen Etzler, who did not play last year. Excuse me. And you see this team. So that's kind of what Ohio State, that's what they're building around. Then you have this top 5 or 5th ranked recruiting class: Bryce Sensabaugh, Felix Akpera, Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale Jr., Bowen Hardman. These 5 guys, which I think the big ones here are going to be Bryce Sensabaugh, Bruce Thornton, and Chris Holtmann also mentioned today Roddy Gale, how they're going to be incredibly important just based on just what they're losing, what kind of where they're going to need the depth. I think Felix is going to play a lot too. But it'll be interesting to see. So that's kind of the next step here. And from there, you have these Holtmann, Jake Diebler, these guys trying to come into kind of fill the room, because it's very, very young right now. You got to build it in with transfers. So they got Tanner Holden, Sean McNeil. So Wright State transfer Tanner Holden to be kind of that another guard type wing guy. Sean McNeil, bigger guard, but he's 6'3" around. So pretty typical size for a point guard, but not that playmaking point guard. I think Ohio State, my 2 cents, they're going to try and rely on Bruce Thornton, and that could be a day one change, especially with the loss of Michi Johnson Jr. You could see Bruce Thornton kind of taking the reins of this offense right away. Anyway, one of my main questions coming out of this, and one of the main talking points that I asked Malaki about, I asked Chris Holtmann about, was, okay, Malaki Branham is gone. He's Ohio State's first one and done since D'Angelo Russell in 2015. Great. Does that change your expectation for these 5 that are coming in? Because if I'm, and maybe this is way too simple, and maybe I'm not sure, but say I'm Bryce Sensabaugh. Okay, I'm coming into this program and I know what I can do. The way that Chris Holtmann has talked about me is extremely high. He can be something that Ohio State has really never had. If I'm Bryce and I see what Malaki did, I should be like, oh, I can do that. I can be that one and done. I can take control, and I can, do what he did, lead Ohio State to its first Sweet 16 and God knows when, and then leave for the NBA, But and I asked Malaki about this and what his kind of plan was. It's not like Chris Holtmann mentioned this too. Malaki didn't think he was going to do this. I mean, he thought he was going to get to the NBA at some point. He knew what he had, but he wasn't planning on being a one and done. That came out of consistency. That came out of confidence growing, and that came out of the situation that Ohio State needed him. Ohio State needed him to play big minutes because they didn't have anybody else. Justice Sueing was gone. Seth Towns was gone. Dwayne Washington Jr. was gone. So they needed somebody, and Malaki Branham developed into that body and kind of the best case scenario in that situation. So in every single freshman, and this is what Chris Holtmann made clear, this is what Malaki Branham made clear to me, was every single freshman, when you come in, has their own distinct path. They have their own distinct plan. And so it's not going to be, oh, Bruce Thornton's going to be a one and done because Malaki Branham is. No, that's not how this works. He might be, they might have three of them. They might have two of them. I don't know, but this is not how, this is kind of uncharted territory for Ohio State because they haven't had a first round pick since D'Angelo Russell. So they're kind of returning, and then coming into this year, they're having two. So Malaki Branham, EJ Liddell. So they're kind of developing this, okay, can we consistently get first round draft picks into the system and kind of build our recruiting base that way? Can we kind of develop a pipeline of young talent where it doesn't matter who they have, doesn't matter who's in the recruiting class that they're developing, and they can get to, well, they want a Sweet 16. They haven't been able to do that under Chris Holtmann, but that's kind of the goal here. And that's what they're going to need to do with Branham officially gone. Freshmen are going to need to play. They're going to need somebody to step up and be that kind of Malaki Branham type role where they're going to need help because they don't really have that centerpiece right now. Yeah, Justice Sueing, if healthy, could be that guy, but you don't know who that's going to be. They're going to need multiple guys, like the really cheesy and overblown kind of example or analogy of Batman and Robin. Who's going to be Batman? Who's going to be Robin here? Because they're going to need somebody to build around. And Chris Holtmann, I think, is very, very confident that Ohio State can do it, but they just don't know who it's going to be. And really that question just came up, officially. It's what they're trying to kind of build and kind of, create that identity before the season starts. But really that identity, that question is kind of made official now, knowing they knew that Malaki Branham was going to go. And that's why they got Tanner Holden. That's why they got Sean McNeil. But now that he's officially gone, now that he's officially signed an agent, it becomes reality. And it's something that Ohio State's going to have to face. And it's going to be very, very interesting to watch just to see what Chris Holtmann can do, what Jake Diebler can do. Because, and side note here too, I think if Ohio State can get back to, like whether it's a Sweet 16 run, whether it's, I don't know what the heck they're going to do, finish in the top three teams in the Big Ten, which it seems to be kind of wide open. Jake Diebler's not going to be there very long. He's a great recruiter. He's the centerpiece of what Ohio State's been able to do on the recruiting trail. Him and Chris Holtmann are just very, very, very good and very, very personable recruiters. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the next year. And you're going to see a lot of development. I think I'm going to end with this. One of the things that Malaki Branham, I asked him about, okay, what should freshmen watch out for? Like when what was your first kind of experience like with Ohio State? What did you want to kind of accomplish like in your first, whether it's camp, whether it's first games or whatever? And he just said, kind of just buckle down and work, and just not with expectation. One of the things that Chris Holtmann said was, you would be shocked with how little minutes Branham expected to play his freshman year based on when he was asked by the coaching staff. So there was no expectations for Malaki Branham to be a one and done, but it's just what he turned into. And I think ideally that's what Ohio State needs, is that level of production from a guy in 2022. And it'll be interesting to see what that turns into, where the needs are going to lie, because it'll be interesting. So, and I think, Chris Holtmann has kind of developed into this developer, for lack of a better term, and we'll see where Ohio State can go here. But yeah, again, just wanted to get my thoughts out there. There's going to be plenty of more content here in the coming days on Malaki Branham. story tomorrow morning. Watch out for that on some of the things that I kind of rambled on about here. Wait for that. NFL draft is tomorrow. Stay tuned for coverage. I will be potting it up as well for instant reactions, especially on that first round when Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson gets selected, likely, barring anything just absolutely stupid. But follow us on Twitter at OhioST_rivals. Zach Carpenter's on Twitter as well, our recruiting writer, doing a great job. Follow me on Twitter at Colin Gay _rivals. And join our community. We're building something special, as I've said multiple times. Please join us, talk about Ohio State. This is kind of the starting point of the discussion. So come on the board, give your thoughts. How do you think Malaki Branham is going to do in the NBA? What does Ohio State need to do to kind of replicate that heading into next year? Because I mean, that's going to be the main question heading in. So join our family, join our community, and stay tuned for another podcast tomorrow night. We'll be posting, and we'll see you guys on the message board.